This is Whisper from History, where forgotten voices rise again. In every city, there are secrets hidden that shake the human soul. Tonight, we tell the story of a hotel room, a room that whispers death is only waiting for its time, a room where many entered, but none ever returned. This is not just a story. It is a journey that will take you into the depths of darkness. The wallpaper was faded, patterned with a design that might once have been fashionable in the 1930s. Now, it seemed to bleed shadows across the cracked plaster walls. The curtains were drawn tight, muffling the city beyond. A lamp flickered on the bedside table, its weak light unable to fill the corners. The room smelled faintly of mildew and dust. To anyone checking in, it looked like just another aging hotel room. Yet behind the peeling paint and the dim glow, a reputation had formed. A reputation whispered by locals and feared by staff. Room 6 at the Riverside Grand. A room where, they said, no guest ever survived the night. The story begins in the 1940s, when the Riverside Grand was a proud establishment on the edge of the River District. Travelers came by train, by bus, sometimes even by steamboat. The hotel promised elegance, mahogany staircases, brass railings polished daily, a grand chandelier hanging in the lobby. But tucked into its second floor was a modest chamber, smaller than the others, known to staff only as the corner room. It was in that very room, in the spring of 1943, that the first unexplained death was recorded. A traveling salesman from Chicago, James Whitmore, checked in after a long journey south. Witnesses later recalled that he was cheerful, even humming a tune as he carried his suitcase upstairs. He ordered a late supper, chatted with the desk clerk, and went to bed around midnight. By morning, James Whitmore was found lying on the carpet, face pale, body twisted unnaturally, as though something had startled him awake in his sleep. The coroner's report was inconclusive. Cardiac arrest, the papers said, but there was no history of heart trouble. He was only 32 years old, healthy, strong. His death seemed unlikely, almost cruelly sudden. No one thought much of it. Not yet. But then came 1946. A newlywed couple, Henry and Martha Collins, honeymooners from Kentucky, checked into the same corner room. They were last seen laughing in the lobby, Martha clutching her bouquet of fresh roses, Henry carrying their bags. Staff recalled them as the picture of happiness. At 3:07 a.m., other guests on the floor reported hearing a piercing scream. When the night porter rushed to investigate, he found Martha collapsed against the wall, shaking uncontrollably, her face drained of all color. Henry lay beside the bed motionless. Doctors tried to revive him. They could not. His death was ruled another case of sudden cardiac arrest. But witnesses swore the look on Martha's face told a different story. She refused to ever speak of what she saw in that room. For the rest of her life, she lived in silence about that night. 3 years later, 1949, a soldier returning from Europe, John Ellis, decided to stay at the Riverside. He had survived the war, but he would not survive that room. Once again, the time was the same. 3 a.m., a guest in the room below swore he heard furniture dragging across the floor, followed by a single, hollow thud. By morning, Ellis was found dead on the bed, his expression frozen, eyes wide open, as though he had seen something unspeakable in his final moments. It was no longer coincidence. By the early 1950s, whispers had spread through the city. Taxi drivers would warn travelers, "Don't take the corner room at the Riverside." Locals crossed themselves when the hotel was mentioned. Staff began to refuse to clean room 6 after dark. Even the managers grew uneasy, though officially they denied everything. But the deaths continued, always at night, always around the same hour. 3 a.m. Some called it the devil's hour, the time when the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. Priests spoke of restless spirits. Psychologists argued it was stress, hysteria, coincidence. But the evidence mounted. In 1954, a schoolteacher from Louisiana, Margaret Hill, checked into room 6 during a convention. She was found sitting upright in the chair by the window, her face pale, her hands clutching her chest. Her watch had stopped at exactly 3:02 a.m. The next year, 1955, a traveling jazz musician died under the same circumstances. 1957, a businessman from Dallas. 1959, a visiting poet. By 1960, the Riverside Grand had a reputation so dark that the room was almost never booked. When desperate travelers were placed there, many left before midnight, unable to sleep, claiming they felt watched. But those who stayed rarely woke. What was happening inside room 6? Theories abounded. Some claimed the room was cursed, built upon an old burial ground. Others whispered it was the site of a crime long covered up. A maid who had worked at the hotel since the 1930s confided, in hushed tones, that she once heard footsteps pacing inside when no one was checked in, and when she dared open the door, the room was empty, yet the curtains swayed as though someone had just brushed past them. Could it be imagination? Or was something lurking in the shadows? In 1963, a Catholic priest was invited by the hotel's manager to bless the room. He sprinkled holy water, whispered prayers, pressed a crucifix to the walls. Guests slept uneasily in nearby rooms, hearing him chanting past midnight, but the blessing did not stop the deaths. Later that very year, a journalist named Robert Kane checked into the hotel with the explicit goal of disproving the rumors. He was determined to show that the so-called cursed room was nothing more than superstition. He kept a diary during his stay. The final entry, dated July 12, 1963, reads, "It's almost 3 a.m. The air feels heavy, stifling, as though the room itself is holding its breath. I think I hear faint whispering in the walls. I'm going to keep the light on, just in case." Robert Kane never checked out. By the 1970s, room 6 was permanently locked. The hotel quietly boarded it up, pretending it never existed. On the official guest registry, the numbers skipped from 5 to 7. Staff were instructed never to speak of it. The Riverside continued operating, but its golden era was over. Tourists stayed away. By the late 80s, the grand chandelier had gone dark, the carpets wore thin, and the hotel closed its doors entirely. The building was left abandoned, a rotting husk by the riverside. Yet room 6 remained, sealed behind crumbling plaster and nailed wood. But a story like that does not stay buried forever. In the 1990s, urban explorers crept inside the decaying hotel. They found graffiti on the walls, rats scurrying through the hallways, rain leaking from the roof. Yet when they reached the second floor, they discovered something stranger. Behind a warped section of the hallway paneling, they noticed faint numbers carved into the wood. 6. Curiosity got the better of them. They pried it open. Inside was the room, perfectly preserved. Dust thick on the furniture, cobwebs hanging from the chandelier. The bed stood neatly made, as though waiting for another guest. On the bedside table lay a single object, an old pocket watch, stopped, the hands frozen at 3 a.m. Historians dug deeper. They discovered that before the Riverside Grand was built, the land had once been a morgue during a cholera outbreak in the late 19th century. Dozens of bodies, unclaimed, were said to have been buried hastily in the ground beneath. Could the room have been built directly above them? Others traced darker rumors. In 1928, when the hotel was still under construction, a worker allegedly fell to his death in that very room. His body was discovered days later, decomposing in the summer heat. Some said his ghost never left, but another theory proved far more chilling. Old police records hinted at a violent crime. In 1935, a young woman named Clara had vanished near the hotel. Witnesses last saw her entering the riverside late at night. She was never found. Yet one chambermaid swore she had heard muffled screams coming from room 6 during that very week. Was the room cursed because of what happened to her? Was Clara's spirit forever bound to its walls? No answer was ever confirmed. But the legends multiplied. By the 2000s, the Riverside Grand had been purchased by a developer who planned to renovate it into modern apartments. During demolition, workers refused to touch the second floor. One man reportedly collapsed while walking past the boarded-up door, clutching his chest, whispering, "I can't breathe." He survived, but he refused to ever return. Construction halted. Investors pulled out. The building was once again abandoned, and room 6 remained. Today, the Riverside Grand is nothing more than a hollow shell. Windows broken, roof collapsing, the scent of mold seeping into the air. Yet locals still cross the street when passing it. Children dare one another to throw stones at the boarded-up entrance. And travelers, those who know the story, sometimes come searching for room 6. But no one stays inside. Not anymore. So, what was really happening behind the locked door? Was it a curse born from tragedy, the restless dead refusing to move on? Was it coincidence, a series of unexplained heart failures that became legend? Or was something more sinister hiding in the shadows, feeding off the fear of its guests? We may never know. But one thing is certain: every story, every witness, every record points to the same chilling truth. Whenever someone stayed the night in room 6 of the Riverside Grand, the clock always stopped at 3 a.m., and the guest never woke again. Whenever someone slept in room No. 6, at 3 a.m., the clock stopped ticking, and that person never woke again. If this story has sent chills down your spine, don't forget to subscribe, and tell us in the comments, do you have the courage to spend a night in room No. 6?